NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is expected to propose a new format on Thursday that includes a 22-team format, 16 playoff teams, 6 additional teams with a play-in tournament for that 8th spot in the playoffs. I'm Sierra Goodwill, here with Mike Petraglia and Keith Smith. Guys, how do you feel about this new proposed format?
Yeah, I like it. I think this is you weren't once it was really ruled out that all 30 teams didn't make sense to come, and some of those 30 teams didn't really have a lot of interest in coming. Some did. I think this is the format that makes the most sense for everybody. It gives those teams that had a fighting chance at the playoffs, even if distant, a chance to make it, and then the teams that are in the playoffs already, they're going to get 8 games to really kind of settle out seeding, warm themselves up, and get themselves ready for the playoffs. So I think this was a really great compromise by all parties involved to do the thing that makes the most sense for the league as a whole.
The thing I like about it, and I do like this format, I like the opportunity for these teams to play some games heading into the postseason, which is different, of course, than what the NHL is going forward with. This does give each team the opportunity to kind of get their legs underneath them in a highly competitive situation before they go right into the playoffs. I don't think anybody was in favor of that, players or coaches, what I mean by that. I don't think they wanted to see a situation where they were dumped right into the playoffs. I think they wanted to work themselves up. As Keith says, 8 games should be enough time for them to get their legs under them. Essentially, right, it's a second preseason, if you will, only instead of going into the regular season, you're going into the playoffs. And for a team like the Celtics, 8 games, it's going to be a stretch to make up those 3 games on Toronto to, get the number 2 seed. But there's a chance that they could get hot and Toronto does not play as well. Obviously, what you're looking at is for the Celtics to maybe go 7-1 and Toronto to go 4-4 or, 3-5, something like that.
So like you guys mentioned, all 22 teams will play 8 regular season games before they enter into the playoff. And how they're doing it is the teams will just proceed with the 8 next games that they were scheduled to play. If a team is on that 8-game stretch that isn't part of the 22 games, they just move ahead to the next game. So for the Celtics, that would mean their first game back would be against the Bucks. So they're going to get their feet wet real early against the best team in the East, for sure, arguably the best team in the NBA right now. But you mentioned it a little bit, Trags. The Celtics sit at 3rd place in the Eastern Conference with these 8 regular season games. Do you think that there's any way that they can have some sort of upward movement, or do you think they're pretty stuck right there at that number 3 spot?
I'd say there's about an 80% chance of them staying right where they are, maybe even higher than that, 85% chance of them just staying at the 3rd seed. The point about the Bucks, they don't have to go to Milwaukee now and play in front of a hostile crowd. And the Bucks obviously had one of the best home records in the NBA, before the pause. And now they're going to be playing in an empty arena in front of a neutral court. And certainly that takes that element out of it. So I think that helps. Certainly it's got to help the Celtics a little bit in terms of that not being a game in Milwaukee. And I think the Celtics are going to approach this game by game, see how it turns out for them. If they start off well, then I think Brad Stevens will push it a little more. If they don't, I think he's going to have more of an eye on getting ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's almost as much about keeping an eye behind them as it is ahead of them. And they're about 2.5 games up on the Miami Heat. So I think they're going to really make sure that they try to stay locked into that 3 seed. Because what that also allows you to do is miss Milwaukee until the conference finals, which is going to be really important. So I think that is something that they would like to do if at all possible. So I think, catching Toronto, Trag said it, it's going to be hard. 3 games, that's a lot to make up with only 8 games left. That's a really difficult ask. The Celtics don't have the easiest schedule of the 22-team grouping that's coming in either. They've got some teams, but there's a question of, well, if you're playing top teams, maybe do the Bucks, play it a little slower and say, hey, we're kind of locked in. We're really treating this like a warm-up. Is that not maybe as hard a game as it looks to kind of kick off this abbreviated regular season? So I think that's, the Celtics, I'm with Trags. I think if they come out playing well and you get down to 4 games left and they're only a couple back of Toronto, I think Stevens pushes pushes a little harder to maybe try and get that 2 spot. If they are, if it doesn't really look realistic, then I think you might see, him kind of work guys in and out a little bit and really just make sure they're ready to go for whoever their first round opponent might end up being.
Well, for all the rest of our Celtics and NBA coverage, check it out on our website at clnsmedia.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Celtics All Access.